Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. I've got a Christopher Lee double feature for you this time around. It's from the wonderful people at Umbrella Entertainment, an Australian company that does DVDs and Blu-rays, and it is kind of interesting. They're Christopher Lee obscurities. They're not your mainstream Christopher Lee. They're not the Wicker Man. They're not a Dracula movie. They're not Captain Invincible. These ones are kind of outliers. They're movies Christopher Lee did in the 60s and early 1970s. In fact, 1965 and 1970, when he was making a crust. He wasn't being paid tremendously well. He travelled all over Europe to make different movies, and these two are very much unusual Christopher Lee movies, and that makes them a lot of fun. It does say Region B on the back, but it plays well without changing the region, which leads me to suspect there's no region coding on these discs. But I should tell you what the movies are. The movies are from 1965, Circus of Fear, and from 1970, a little gem called The Bloody Judge. There's the back cover, which has a whole bunch of details on it. These are very bare bones discs. You get a trailer, you get the movie, and in one case you get an extended version of the movie. But there are no extras on it. This is purely for the film, and they're films that aren't really accessible. I know that there was a DVD release of Circus of Fear back in the day with a very shitty cover. But this version I like a lot more, and it's part of the retro horror double feature. You'll see it up there, which Umbrella Entertainment is doing, and I like the fact that they're digging deep and finding these obscurities. So let's get started and talk about Circus of Fear. This was directed by an Argentinian-born director, John Llewellyn Moxey, who worked in England for a long time and then moved over to the States and did a whole bunch of episodic television. If there was a prominent TV series anytime between about 1969 and 1975, chances are John Llewellyn Moxey did an episode of it. It was kind of like a tradesman director, a good, honest, professional journeyman who made interesting movies and never really made himself the star of the movie in the same way much larger directors like Hitchcock and Fellini and Francis Ford Coppola did. I like what he did with this movie. It was made in collaboration with West German company at that stage, Constantin Films, on their Rialto Films subset. And that's the reason why there are a whole bunch of German actors in it. First 20 minutes of this movie is great because it's a fantastic little robbery. It's an armoured car robbery. It takes place on a Sunday morning on Tower Bridge in London. They raise the bridge to stop anybody from getting across it. And the guys in a bunch of cars rob an armoured car and take 6 or 7 bags of £5 notes. And they escape in a really interesting way. I'm not going to spoil the robbery for you because in itself, leaving aside all of the stuff that happens afterwards, it's a nice, tight little robbery. It's filmed well, it's filmed imaginatively, they use the setting really well, and the locations are really well chosen too. They're around the Isle of Dogs and around Tower Bridge, and it's got a kind of gritty documentary feel about it. One of the robbers is played by English character actor Victor Madden, and he comes to a sticky ending, which is not too much of a spoiler. But you've also got Klaus Kinski in there. He was a part of the West German mob that came over to make the movie sellable to the West German audience, along with a couple of other people. Eddie Arendt turns up. He was very big in the German Krimi film scene that Constantin Films and Rialto did. And also a guy called Heinz Drach, who are all three of them are well-known faces in the Krimi movie scene from Rialto Films, and they were brought across to make things a lot plausible. Now, when I say John Llewellyn Moxey directed this film, he directed the English version. The German version was directed by a guy called Werner Jacobs, and so he did a German language version of it. And the German one was shown in black and white, whereas the English language and English version of it was shown in colour. In America, the movie was known as Psycho-Circus, which is a pretty stupid name. In fact, both names are fairly stupid for movies. So the guys perform the robbery, and as they're getting away, there's a police chase with the van with all the money in it on the M1 motorway in England, and it's quite a fast car chase too. I don't think they undercranked the camera to make it look faster than it was, but it's a really tightly shot and edited chase scene. And the van crashes and all the money gets caught on fire. Only the guy played by Victor Madden escapes with a suitcase full of £5 notes, which was a lot of money in those days. And we know that because we see him buying a car for 200 quid at a used car lot and taking it to a place near Windsor where he is dispatched with quite nastily, and the money disappears. We then cut to a circus, and the circus is at its winter headquarters in the factory in near Windsor, and it's actually the Billy Smart Circus, which turned up in every circus movie made in England in the 1960s, but they rebadged it as Barberini Circus. And the movie then becomes a whodunit. Who's got the money? Who is blackmailing the person that's got the money? Who's killing the people in the circus? And one of the main suspects is Christopher Lee's character, who is a masked lion tamer. He's got a mask on because apparently he got scars from a mishap with some lions back in the day. So he wears a black mask. And there are times when it's Christopher Lee and there are times when it's a body double who's significantly shorter and doesn't look a lot like Christopher Lee. But that makes the movie even more fun. We get some other interesting character actors in there. We get Leo Genn playing a posh policeman. Never liked that. I never liked that kind of trope in the 50s and 60s, where anybody above a certain level in the police force in England was a posh dude. Good working class coppers. That's why the Sweeney had so much impact when it came in the 70s, because you had a couple of working class police detectives breaking that trope, which was part of the scene in British crime movies from the 1920s onwards. Of course, you have to have beautiful women in these things as well. You've got Margaret Lee, who turned up in so many of these B-grade movies in the 1960s. And you also get Susie Kendall in a small role. Susie Kendall at the time, I think, was married to Dudley Moore. At the time, Billy Smart's circus was the biggest circus in the world. It had tons of animals, so they every now and then, while they're doing parts of the detective thing, you'd see a whole bunch of camels or elephants or llamas in the background of the scene. In fact, there's a fist fight between two of the characters while the building they're in is full of elephants. Kind of interesting, kind of cool. It sets up that circus world, but you never actually see a circus tent because they're wintering. They're waiting out the season until it gets warmer and they can start touring again. So all you see are a very large, probably an ex-factory, which is the winter headquarters of a circus, plus all the circus animals and the circus performers wandering in and out of the place. There is a little bit of a trapeze act that's put on, but it uses stock footage for the audience, and so it probably wasn't filmed in front of an audience in a circus tent. But that kind of makes it interesting as well. I like the fact that the backgrounds and the way they film it is a bit sketchy. It wasn't a large budget movie, and a lot of people kind of parallel this film with Circus of Horrors, the one with Anton Diffring and Donald Pleasance in it, which I talked about on a previous video. It's got a lot more circus in it than Circus of Fear has. So the movie is all over the place. Even though it is a Christopher Lee double feature and Christopher Lee is billed on the cover, there's not a lot of Christopher Lee in it, but the Christopher Lee we get is pretty cool.
That money that they're all looking for, I have it.
But it wasn't you.
No, of course not. I didn't kill anybody.
He knows what kind of movie it is, he knows what kind of character he's playing, and he does it okay. So the movie is a kind of weird one because it starts out as a kind of crime film with a beautifully shot armoured robbery and a getaway. And then it cuts to being a murder mystery. Now, this was based on an Edgar Wallace novel. And all of the West German Krimi films of the time were based on Edgar Wallace novels. It was a weird little kind of subgenre where the Germans loved these novels, and Rialto films were capitalised on that and turned them into some interesting films. There's also quite an evil person of small stature played by Skip Martin, who was part of the circus and is quite a nasty piece of work. He gets to overact wonderfully in his scenes. There's whip cracking, there's knife throwing, there's lions in the circus, there's an escaped lion in the circus. There's all of these different things in there to distract from the fact that this is basically a police procedural movie after that initial robbery. And the cops that wander around don't do a hell of a lot of good detective work. They just kind of walk around talking to people until something goes wrong and another person dies and there's a bit more evidence on it. So as far as the detective part of this is concerned, it's not a big part of the movie. And some of the more boring characters like Leo Jen's detective get way too much at the time, but it's a movie of its time, and it's a weird hybrid of British crime film and German Krimi movie. And because of that hybridization, it makes it just a little bit more interesting than it would have been had it just been a straight up British crime film or a straight up German Edgar Wallace based Krimi film. There's not graphic gore in it, there's not graphic nudity in it, there's a bit of suspense. There's a cliffhanger ending, literally. And it's one of those kind of B-programmer films that turned up in cinemas here in Australia a lot because they got them cheaply. They weren't A-grade movies. They had people whose names were known, but who weren't big movie stars. I should mention both of these movies were produced by the same guy who had also done the Fu Manchu movies with Christopher Lee, a guy called Harry Alan Towers. Now, Harry Alan Towers was a real-life version of the character of Tuccini in Vincente Minnelli's 2 Weeks in Another Town. Tuccini has this to say about himself in 2 Weeks in Another Town, in a scene where Mino Doro, playing Tuccini, talks to Edward G. Robinson about making a film.
Don't you want the best movie you can get? No. The films I produce make money. And you know why? Because I'm an international peddler.
And I like what Tuccini says in this, and it's very much what Harry Alan Towers was as a producer. So the second film, The Bloody Judge, I'm sure many people have said that in court. The Bloody Judge is very different than Circus of Fear in a number of significant ways. First off, it was directed by Jess Franco. Now, if you know who Jess Franco is, you know what I mean. Jess Franco started out making horror movies in the early 1960s and through into the 21st century ended up making pretty much adult films. He specialised in doing horror films. He did a whole bunch of them, things like The Bare-Breasted Countess. And you can go down a rabbit hole of Jess Franco films, and they will surprise you, shock you, and make you wonder why he didn't get better at what he did. I think this one was filmed in Italy, though nothing on IMDb tells me where it was filmed, and Wikipedia was no help either. The music's pretty good. It's by Duran and Nikolai, and in this one, Christopher Lee, who does get a significant role, plays Lord High Chief Justice Jeffreys, Chief Justice of England, and one of his favourite things to do is to condemn women as witches for political and sexual leverage. This is kind of a little bit like the Vincent Price movie Witchfinder General, though a lot less sanguine than that, and a lot less grim and gritty, and Christopher Lee does some weird things in this film. First off, he's got rocking a really interesting wig, and then another really interesting wig, and he gets to play a big kind of harpsichord pipe organ for recreational purposes. Like Circus of Fear, he's playing against Leo Jen, who plays Lord Wessex, who is a political opponent of Jeffreys, and whose son is engaged to a young woman whose sister was condemned to death by Justice Jeffreys. So you get sex sadism, you get some interesting battle scenes of cannon versus charging cavalry, which may or may not have been pinched from another film. I don't know. It doesn't tell me that in anything I can look at. But it's very much a weird kind of movie because in this one, as a very rare thing, you've got Christopher Lee playing a sexual predator. We've seen Christopher Lee play a lot of roles in his day. He's played supervillains, he's played Dracula, he's played Frankenstein's monster, he's played the Mummy. But a straight up, twisted AF sexual predator isn't the first thing you think when you think of the career of Christopher Lee, but in this one he does. And there are some scenes where Christopher Lee's doing the voiceover, and you never see his character, but you see somebody else's hands roaming over the body of a beautiful girl. In this case, played by Maria Rom. Margaret Lee plays one of the other beautiful women in this one, and Maria Schell plays a blind witch who lives in a cave. This movie again is all over the place. It starts out as a historical drama, it goes into horror, and then particularly in the inserts for this film, which were taken from the German prints of it, it turns into kind of kinky erotica. So it's a really weird film. Plus you've got an executioner played by Howard Vernon, who had worked with Jess Franco a number of times in the past, who's wearing a kind of black cowl and tights outfit that makes him look like Marty Feldman in Young Frankenstein. And I could never take the character seriously after that. You've also got Deformed Henchman, which is kind of standard for the course in these kind of movies. You've got lots of screaming women. The disfigured servant, by the way, is a guy called Satchel. And the makeup changes between scenes. It's kind of interesting just tracking the way the facial scarring on the Satchel character changes during the movie. The interesting thing about the witch character, Mother Rosa, played by Maria Schell, is she's clairvoyant. She predicts what happens to the characters. Because this is a Jess Franco movie, because it's all over the place, there are bits that you think, oh, this could have been a better movie if they had played more of that, or if they'd have followed through on that. It's that kind of film where it's good in bits, but it's appallingly bad in other bits. And that, if you can ride that wave and you can ride those currents, you can have a lot of fun with a film like this. And the odd thing is, Christopher Lee is pretty good in it. His Jeffries is chilling and nasty, and it follows through on that idea that a good movie villain doesn't think he's the villain. He thinks he's justified, he thinks he's doing the right thing for the right reasons. But he ain't. And more than many of the roles that I've seen Christopher Lee play, where it's very black and white that he's an evil creature or an evil person, that deluded self-image that Justice Jeffries has makes it kind of interesting. And Christopher Lee does give full value in this one, even though, of course, he, as a jobbing actor, he had no control over the end product. And the combination of Harry Alan Towers and Jess Franco had their eye on the dollars and not necessarily on making the best film they possibly could. Now, neither of these is a great film, but if you're a bit of a completist about Christopher Lee, and why the hell not, you could do worse than picking up these two. If you're a fan of Jess Franco's movies, you could do it. If you're a fan of English crime films, you can get a lot from them as well. I'm glad I got these in my collection. They're not, like I said, they're not fantastic films, but they're very much of their time. And if you're looking at the history of cinema, a lot of people who do that just look at the top end of town. They look at the quality products. They're talking about Antonioni and Fellini and all of those guys who I like. But there's another layer of cinema that goes from the beginning of cinema right to the present day, where companies like A24 are doing a very much different product than Disney or Universal or Sony. So you've kind of got that underground of B cinema, which is quite entertaining. And even though it may not be perfect, and even though not all of the product put out by a certain B studio is good, there are going to be some gems there. And I think that these are part of that story of exploitation cinema, of genre cinema at a certain time in history. And for that, they are something that I kind of like having in my collection. So that's it for this time around. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about these ones and which Christopher Lee movies you like. Don't tell me The Wicker Man, because everybody loves The Wicker Man. Christopher Lee's best movie. But tell me which Christopher Lee movies you like, and also tell me which Jess Franco movies you like, because they're very much an acquired taste. But he was very prolific. And so you can go down a rabbit hole of endlessly watching Jess Franco movies. And when your family and friends pick you up in the gutter, you can tell them all about it. Till next time, look after yourselves, stay safe, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. try to find the most obscure Christopher Lee movies you can, just the way Umbrella Entertainment did with these two. And I'll catch you next time.
Let the business of the court commence.